one of the most powerful things that you can do, or as a person, as a leader, the most powerful thing you can do is collect the right questions.
This is what this episode is about. How these powerful principles look when they meet the real world, where emotions take over, where business isn't just strategy, it's a mirror. It doesn't just reflect your plans, it reflects who you are. So today we're talking with Byron Antonas, a business coach who helps founders not just fix their companies, but face themselves. So Byron, the first question that I want to ask you is about clarity, tools, and the gap between knowing and doing. A lot of the people you work with lack clarity. What are some of the most common things they're missing when they come to you?
One of the most important things that I found, and I did 2 coaching sessions just this weekend. I work weekends, even holidays, etc. And a lot of the guys, they lack clarity around where they really want to take their business. Again, I primarily started in the niche of construction, so I work with a lot of men who don't necessarily have a business background. And in terms of their clarity, they've built these companies out of instinct. And instinct isn't necessarily clarity in terms of growth. They're doing what they have to because it's a necessity. Now, when you get to a certain point where you hit a brick wall, which all of them do, some of them are making millions, which is incredible because they don't have business background. Some of them aren't studying, and they're working off of referrals. They've got no marketing engine going, but they're making tons of money. And when you take the time to speak with them, they almost all have leadership mindset problems. They have fear around hiring admin staff. They have fear around marketing, fear of their success of blowing up. One of my longest standing clients, he's been with me for 20 months now. And we had this beautiful conversation where I was talking to him about where we've gotten him to. We've increased his workforce by 500%, which he was initially scared of doing. He only had 6 people, and now he's over 30. It's I don't know if I want to hire all these people. I was well, look, in the construction industry, especially in our country, you can't build a company just with subcontractors. You have to get the internal people in so that you have succession plans, so you have proper leadership plans, so that you can grow everybody and control the vision, the goals, the narrative, and the overall direction and quality of where you want your company to go. And when we first approached his company, he didn't have clarity around the importance of hiring really good A-team players. And this always gets me whenever I have these conversations with these guys who are making millions, because again, they're using a lot of subcontractors. And I'll say, okay, well, how often do you go out to hire? And they'll be well, and they'll generally say, oh, maybe once a month. And it's not actually once a month. They're trying to be generous to themselves. And I say, okay, well, if the statistic is that only 15% of people that you interview are A-team players, out of 100 interviews, that's only 15% chance to get an A-team player, right? And you're only hiring once a month.
Yeah, as always, it's like putting the reps.
Yeah. And then you see it click for them. And I saw it click for him, where I was well, even if you're doing only one a month, there's only 12 months in a year. Think about how many years it'll take for you to build a team of 18 players. And he went, oh my gosh, I see it. So then we put all the steps in place, and I gave him the tools, such as the job descriptions, the interview questions. I even sat with him on the interviews and helped him go through that process, finding the agencies that can help source this top talent, and then going through the training process of bringing them in, indoctrinating them into the company culture, setting them up with the vision, and understanding where they need to go and where they fit, right? Understanding their vision for their. Once you do that and it clicks for people, you can really, really accelerate their growth. And when he first started talking to me 20 months ago, he was I had coached him pro bono for a decade and a half as a friend. And he called me up 20 months ago and he was hey, I'm going to be a millionaire this year. I've been following everything you've been teaching me, and I want to make this official. And then we made it official, and I know that things are working because over a decade and a half, he wasn't scaling his team, and it's only happened within the last 12 months that he's gone from 6 to 30. And at the end of last year, his revenue has more than doubled. It was 2.6 million, and this year he's heading towards 5. That's what it looks like, which is exciting,
Yeah, of course it is. And first thing that I was thinking while you were talking is that basically what they're lacking is the vision. I feel they're thinking what to do now, but not having vision long term to see where I want to go, so that what should I do today, but also tomorrow, also the next month, so I can build a step-by-step plan instead of doing things day by day. So without the vision, they are not able to build a plan and also to predict problems to get organized. So maybe also the vision they're lacking, right?
Vision is something that we tackle pretty aggressively in the first month whenever we start. Because again, if you don't know where you're going, you can't build a path to get there. And there was something that I read a while back, and I don't remember who was the thought leader that I took it from, but if like people who have goals for a thing, say you want to make $10 million, if you set that as a goal versus somebody who doesn't set that as a goal, you are going to be like 80% more likely to achieve that goal because you have the goal. Because what happens biologically, psychologically in your brain when you set goals and you set them with exquisite clarity and the deepest level is your brain starts doing the background work. Right?
Yeah.
You create this, like, you're sitting in the shower or whatever, and like you have this plan, and then there's lots of little pieces that go into a long-term plan. So I gave you an example that was contextually relevant to me in my plan, is I'm constantly looking for what better looks like for myself, for my clients, for my business. And I study a lot of behavioral science, a lot of marketing, etc. And I know that social proof is really, really important. And I came across, there was a company that sent me an email, but in the email, it was a framework for, hands down, the best framework for collecting undeniable social proof, with tools, with when you're supposed to ask the customer the question about, like, give me a testimonial, etc., with like how to put it on your website. And now, like, that's slotted in, and that is now the best thing that fits into my vision to get me to that goal. And I'll be constantly looking for the next one. And when I find it, I'll replace that or I'll build on top of that. But the same thing works for these guys. I had a coaching call with probably my client that has the biggest revenue yesterday. And I was talking to him about his vision for his company. Because it was smaller and he's grown a lot over the last couple of years, he has maybe lost, in his mind, lost a little bit of control of his team because his team's got really big. And he's lost control. He doesn't have the skills and understanding of how to build company culture. So a lot of the things, especially like in construction, you hear two things. You hear people say, I can't find good labor, which is a limiting belief, because it's definitely, like, the labor is out there. You either just aren't doing the right work to find them, or you're not attracting them because you're not attractive to them. And then the other thing is they talk about how maybe people won't follow their instructions, they're not really sure how to hold people accountable, or then maybe they have to, like, yell at people because they're not doing things in the way that they want them to. And I had a conversation with him. I was like, okay, so your vision for your company within this subsection is you want a team of, like, workers that will do things the way that you want, with the outputs and outcomes in like that deliver on the promise of the customer, with the behaviors and attitudes that guarantee that the work is done the way that you expect. Right? So the outputs and outcomes are the work that is done, and the behaviors and attitudes is how the work is done. And he said, yeah, like that's what I want. And I struggle with that because sometimes people will come into my company with preconceptions of how things should be done, but I want it done my way. And he's like, I actually just, on Friday, I had to talk to one of my guys because he forgot something and he should have known better, etc. Right? So I was like, okay, you have this plan for that vision where, like, you don't have to have those conversations anymore. So what has to fall into that plan so that you can deliver on that vision? Have you created standard operating procedures and the guides that they have to follow that guarantee consistency of performance? And he went, no.
Yeah.
And I was like, okay.
I totally agree with that. Basically, it's clarity. It's a really big word that we often take for granted, but it has a lot of meanings, and we can have maybe some degree of clarity, but sometimes, especially when things are not going as we would like, we don't have enough. And I will also add one more thing about the concept of setting goals, setting big goals, because I think that most of the people, and I was doing that too when I was younger, have this misconception like, it doesn't mean that if I think that I want to make like 1 million per year, 10 million, or whatever it is the goal, it's going to happen. Why? Just because I want, or because I set a huge goal, is going to manifest himself out of nowhere. But what they're missing is that it's not that you think of the goal and the goal will appear. But if you set it and you review it clearly, which is also something that we do in the elite business program that we are together, the more you think about something, the more you're gonna get ideas, and the more you're gonna get blurry ideas, the more these ideas are gonna become more clear. And then you will get a starting point. Oh, so maybe I can start this. You try, maybe it goes well, maybe you fail, then you get the experience. And then you start again with more experience. This is the process that is behind. It's not just, oh, I set a goal and it will happen just because I decide that goal. Is what your mind is going to create day by day. And we need the patience because it's not going to happen overnight. You sleep on it and you will get the magic formula once you wake up tomorrow. Oh, okay, now I know what to do. And this is the most stressful part because all of us want results immediately. We are kind of in a hurry to get them. But it's also the beauty about results because if you could get everything you want a fraction of a second, you wouldn't even appreciate it, probably.
You're right. You gotta earn it. Yeah, like on clarity. I think clarity is really important because one of the things that I find, especially leaders, when they first start thinking about clarity, they're very self-centered. They're like, oh, I need clarity for myself. Oh, I need clarity for my business. But they don't understand that as the head of the business, as the leader that everybody looks to, they have to give clarity to everyone else. It's not just their employees. Primarily it's their employees, but they have, like when they understand their vision, they understand their goals, and they are specific. Specificity is something that I work on with my guys all the time because it's one of those things that once you see it, you can't unsee it. Like, why is specificity important? Because it allows other people to not misunderstand you.
And also get their own clarity.
Right.
By that.
But it also allows people to not misunderstand you and hold you accountable for the words of your voice. So if you say, I want to have the cleanest job site in the country, that's really specific, right? Yeah. Versus saying, I want to be the best. I want to have the cleanest job site in the country. But then people can hold you accountable. Like, okay, well, what does that mean on an even deeper level? Well, it means to the point where if we're working on a job site, even if there's a bottle cap on the grass, I shouldn't see that. The customer shouldn't see that. We clean the job site every single day. Like one of the guys that I work with, that he's internalized this on such a deep level. Like he does roofing. He's got specialized equipment to make sure that like the shingles and all the material when they're like replacing a roof, it never even touches the ground. Yeah. Like, that's next level because customers, especially, I wouldn't even just say in my country, in most countries, you hear about, and maybe you've done some like home improvement or something in your house. When you have a bad contractor, somebody who doesn't respect your space, who doesn't keep things clean, who doesn't prevent like dust, especially when you're doing like internal demolition, like dust, yeah. It can get into everything. One of my guys has like air, like these machines he puts inside whenever they're doing demolition that like sucks all the dust out of the air, right? Yeah. They take the extra step because once it's there, it's a pain to clean up and it's really hard to clean up. So if you show up with, say, if you're somebody who's doing like $3,000 jobs, you can get away with, messiness or whatever. But if you're getting into the millions, these are the kinds of people who can pay for anybody. What they want is somebody that respects them, that respects their vision, that makes sure that things are done at levels that they would never even think of. And if you can do these they seem like little things, but when you actually do it, you make the promise and you deliver on it, and they see the outcome versus someone else, like all it takes is for them to have had somebody else work for them that didn't do those things, for them to see that and be like, I don't ever want to go backwards. I want that forever. That's what one of my guys is doing. Like we got him set up with one of the most prolific designers in the country, in one of the most exclusive communities in the country, and he's gone from having like one job there, which is like $1 million, to like he's got 4 going on right now. That's a lot of money. And it was crazy because he was struggling with one particular client where he's like, oh, well, they're asking for all this little stuff, and I find it a little bit frustrating. Like he's thinking that they're just being a nitpicky person. But what he realized, it's ironic because we had the conversation on like a Friday and he called me the Saturday right after we had the conversation because I had said some things to him. I was like, maybe your mindset is a little bit off. Maybe the customer actually really cares and really trusts you. And what happened the very next day was he had a heart-to-heart with the client because they were finishing up the job and they were both in tears because the customer was like, I've never seen anybody do a job as good as you. I trust you. I don't want to work with anybody else. We're willing to pay more to keep you on, to do all this other stuff. And he was like, oh my gosh, this is exactly what you were saying was going to happen. And it just happened. And now I understand. I was totally wrong. And now he understands and he sees like all of the things that we've been building towards with his vision, the indoctrination, the culture of his company, all this differentiation of like putting in the extra work. He sees it, and it's paying massive dividends. He's got more money now than he's ever had in his entire life, and he doesn't want to go backwards now. And he doesn't have to, because he now has a super elite client base that doesn't want to let him go.
Yeah. Basically, it's like building a system, and the system create the trust because you know that you're always going to get that result from that type of person. It's like what the brand does, because if you buy Apple, Nike, or if you buy on Amazon, you're buying also the credibility that the brand is giving you to you, because you know that a certain amount of quality is guaranteed. If you buy on Amazon, you know that if you get any issue, the customer service is perfect, because they will solve any problem you have. You don't have to waste time, or maybe you have a problem for refunds. And this is true in every business. And also we have to always remember that people talk with each other, because if you make a good job in my house or in whatever the service is, I'm so happy about it. I want to tell it to everyone. When we get good news, what's the first thing that we do? We want to share it with everyone.
Yeah.
And so the more we share it, also other people will talk, oh, I was talking with a friend of mine and he told me that. And I know that you need this kind of service. Maybe you can get in touch. And this is going to spread and spread and spread, and you can grow. And also you're never going to, you don't have to rely on acquiring new customers, because you'll get the old ones and you also get the new ones. But if you're messing up, you always have to rely on new customers.
Yeah.
So,
And
yeah, tell me.
yeah, I think that this plays into like a few other directions, right? So one of the things that we talk about is like customer obsession, right? Now,
Yeah,
I read a
like
book.
that word.
It's really good. Alex Hormozy talks about it.
Yeah.
Actually, no, he doesn't talk about it. He talked about a book called The Bezos Letters. If you haven't read it, read that book. It's all about how Amazon scaled their company culture and like what customer obsession meant to them. And I always have my clients read this book as well, because it's such a powerful concept when you think, okay, what does being customer obsessed mean? And you always go down to the level of putting the customer at the center of everything that you do. And like I've worked for big companies before where they always put themselves first. They solve business problems instead of solving customer problems. Why is that important? Through my studies of business growth and like understanding what actually moves the needle, you can always go back to like first principles. First principles being like, okay, how do you create profit? You create profit by solving customer problems. So here's a really good example that is super simple that everybody can understand. If you are holding 2 cups of coffee and you're walking down the street and your shoelaces are untied, and maybe you don't know how to tie your shoelace, or maybe you're in a rush and you don't want to bend down, you just know where to put your cups. And I see you, and I'm a professional shoelace tire. And I walk up to you and like, if you give me $1, I'll tie your shoelaces, right? Yeah. And you say, and then maybe you look at my shoes and you say, babe, there's a special knot, it looks fantastic. Okay, you can tie my shoelaces, I give you $1, there we go. I trust you, you solved my problem, I gave you money. And that's like, okay, well, that's how you make profit. All right, well, how do you grow profit? This is something that Hormozy talks about a lot, which is there's only 3 ways. You can get more people to buy from you, you can get more people to buy from you again, you can get more people to pay more. So yeah, you get more people to pay more when they buy from you. And then you stack another thing on top of that, which is, okay, how do you make the most profit in an interaction? You solve bigger customer problems. How do you generate profit? How do you generate the most profit? How do you grow profit? And then the last thing, which I can't remember who said it as well, but this was also really powerful, which is the perspective around what is the purpose of a company, right? And most people, like you actually see it like when the guy mentions it, he's talking to a group of 1,000 people, and he says like, what is the purpose of a company? And most people, like 2 or 3 people will lift their hands and say, to make profit. And he's like, no, that's not what it is. And they go, huh, and they all look sideways. He says, the purpose of a company is to create and keep customers, right?
Is to make customers happy.
Yeah, because one of the fastest ways to keep a company growing is to bring on more and more customers, generate revenue and cash flow, and never lose a customer. So like your profit just keeps building and building and building and building and building. So those 4 frameworks are like super powerful. And if we take it a step further, when we were talking about trust is a major conversion lever. There's 4 major conversion levers. Like, I've been a conversion optimization specialist in my life. And you have perception of cost, right? You have trust, you have like comprehension, user motivation, and like ease of use. Now, if we focus on trust, and we were talking about referrals earlier, if you're solving customer problems, you're making promises, you're getting more people to buy, and people are referring you, like, why is referral so powerful? Because referral is trust transference.
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
Trust transference. I think there was another statistic I came across, which is basically like 64% of people who buy anything, they look for reviews first. Which, a review isn't necessarily a referral, but it's a form of social proof. And referrals are probably the highest form of social proof, because people have conviction, right? And when people who aren't the company, or who aren't you, that have conviction, because they've had good experiences with you and they really like the product. Like, for example, if I love shoes and you love shoes, then maybe it's a new type of Nikes, and I just bought them and I put them on and they're amazing. Like, they fit my feet really well. Maybe they don't even have any shoelaces. They have some type of new like lacing mechanism, and I love it, and I know you'll love it too. I'll come to you with full-on conviction and be like, dude, you have to get these. They look awesome. They're gonna be super comfortable on your feet. You don't even have to tie these things. Like, you have to buy these. Here's how you get it. And you're like, yeah, give me that. Right?
And I'm going to get them. And I'm going to get them, yeah.
Yeah, but the thing is, that works. Like, a $1 product to millions or hundreds of millions. If I'm somebody that's in that community and I have a $5 million mansion and you are my contractor and you always deliver better than anybody else I've ever seen, and now I'm not going backwards, so I'm not going to even look at anybody else, and I have all these other friends and they all want to spend millions of dollars, what is the thing that you're actually doing for them? Yeah. And this is one of the things that hit for me, because I was coaching somebody and then it clicked. This isn't something I read in a book. It clicked, which is, when you're working at that level, you have to be excellent, because what you're doing is you're managing their money. You're managing their money. And nobody in construction thinks about it that way. They think about the money as in the profit that I'm getting, that my company's getting, not the responsibility that you have of managing that customer's money to guarantee the outcome and the dream state that they have. And when you say that, which nobody says it, you say it up front, you're like, look, I understand that this is your dream home. I understand that this is a lot of money. I'm going to make sure that you have zero anxiety. Anxiety, again, comes from not having a clear path to success. Here is our process. We have done this for your neighbor over there and your neighbor over there, and that guy referred you to me, so you know it's good. But this is what it looks like, and you will feel it. You say things like that to people, it drives the emotional response, right?
Yeah, because they feel understood. They know that you're not just want to get the money. As you said, the company is not caring only about making profit, is caring about the customers. It's like one of the best book I've ever read is The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People.
Yeah, good book. Yeah.
There is also the habit which is play win-win. The win-win mentality is what helps both parts to be able to, as I said, we win, because if we think only about profit, we can even think if we win-win, it's okay, but it could be also a win-lose. But if the customer is losing and you are winning, you win only once. The power of the win-win mentality is that you keep winning, because you are happy, the customer is happy, and we keep being happy together. But also, about everything we said so far, I want to touch a point about, we're talking about trust. And to build trust, we need a skill that is a business skill, but I like to call it a life skill, which is communication. Because, like you said, that many of the problems you help solve come down to communication. And honestly, I feel like it's not just a business problem, but a life problem. And one of the biggest mistakes I see when people assume that everyone else sees the world the way they do. We forget that people are operating from totally different perspectives, experiences, and emotional states. What's one of the most common communication problems you see in the businesses you coach, and how do you help people fix it? And also, once they fix this problem, do you think that improving communication in business also transforms the way people show up in their personal lives?
Yeah, I mean, communication, it's not just a nice to have. It is integral into everything that you do. Becoming a great communicator can can make you millions. Because again, if you're thinking maybe from a business perspective, you're thinking about communicating your vision, communicating your message in your marketing, communicating to your team how they should show up for themselves, each other, the clients, the investors, the vendors, etc. Making sure that, like I was saying earlier, like communication at its highest or deepest level is saying things that cannot be misunderstood. If you can communicate on the deepest level where you're always taking the time to have the compassion for the other people and being like, look, I need this result, or I need you to understand this thing, or I need you to feel understood in this way. Right? Like copywriting is all about making sure the reader understands and feels understood. Whereas like giving instructions to somebody, you make sure, like an employee, you want to make sure that they know what has to be done, why they have to do it, and how it impacts the customer. When it comes to like communicating with a customer about what is coming next, when you're talking about future pacing. I don't know if you've ever heard about this term, but they do it really well in Japan, right? Like when you buy something, they always, or very often, they will let you understand, okay, well, you bought this pair of shoes, and here are all of the things that you can think about. Expect that the box is going to arrive on this date. Here are some videos about how to lace your shoes, maybe 7 different ways to lace your shoes up, or all of the different ways that you can, say, if you're somebody who resells shoes, like different ways that you can position the shoe and like showcase it, whatever. There's so many things that you can hang off of communication, and when you again, that's from the perspective of good communication. Bad communication can really hurt you, right? So if we talk about bad communication, that when it comes to a business, that can really hinder you from the perspective of hiring someone. If you're not communicating to them up front what is expected, what your company culture is, what your standards are, like scaling businesses, like elevating standards is really important. If you're not just hiring an employee for your company, but if you're hiring a subcontractor, like one of the biggest things in terms of communication that I've had to solve with one of my contractors, like he's elevated his standards, right? And he wants to make sure that any of the people that he subcontracts to represent him, right? Because he's the overall contractor, and these people come up and they represent him. And he wants to, like, we worked on a bunch of different documents that were like templates, standard operating procedures that could be given to the subcontractors to be like, look, these are our standards, right? If you are going to work with us, you have to follow these standards because it is a reflection on us, and we will not compromise, right? Like when you set standards, you can't compromise, and you have to communicate that. People don't know what you believe as a company, as a person, as a leader, unless you communicate it. They can't read your mind.
Yeah, exactly. That's the point. They can't
Yeah.
read your mind. That you have to be being good in communication means that you can help people, let's say, to read your mind. They're not reading, but you are helping them to understand. You're giving them reasons why you need something, why you behave in such a way, why you're saying things in such a way, because otherwise a misinterpretation is always there. And people are really alert to don't get their ego damaged. So once you can reassure them and say, this is not against you, this is not personal, this is the way we have to work, because otherwise those will be the consequences. And people will understand that this is not against me, this is the reason behind. Now I understand why he behaved in such a way. And this, as I said, is not only about business, because it's also in the everything we do is communication, because it's communication with our friends, with our parents, with the people that we meet every day, with the children. And there are also different levels, because the way you communicate with children, you need to help them understand and talk their language. When you work, you have a different language. So communicating is also like be able to speak different languages. And think about what the other guy I'm talking with, which language is speaking. I'm saying what I'm saying, but if I switch perspectives, what is the message that is getting? So I try to use his eyes now. And this is where communication can become so powerful. We try to put ourselves in the other shoes.
Yeah. So like, I like that you mentioned the point about like putting yourself in somebody else's shoes, because that does take a certain level of self-awareness, compassion for the other person, and thinking ahead, like thinking about the relevance of what is coming out of your mouth, or what you're writing, or what you're saying in a video. Because you don't, especially when you're communicating to somebody that you don't know, or they're not right in front of you, you don't know what they're going to think. But when it comes to running businesses and having employees, or even customers, showing them that you understand them and putting in practices to have them build the muscle to show you that they understand you is really important. Now, getting them to show you that they understand you as a leader, you can do that pretty easily. You just ask them to repeat back to you what they think you said. A lot of good leaders do this, but a lot of people in general miss this step. You'll see a leader that will send like a WhatsApp message to a group, or even they'll walk past somebody like, hey, I need this report, but they didn't say when, they didn't say who the audience was for, they didn't say what was supposed to be in it, and they make a whole bunch of assumptions, right? And assumptions are the mother of all breakdowns.
Yeah, because
right?
they're different for everybody else. My assumptions are different than your assumption. And I really like that you said that the first word you said is when. Okay, I need something about when, because do you want it to have 200 years?
Yeah.
Because you didn't say it.
Yeah.
So putting the constraints, it's once again, we go back in the clarity environment, because if you are crystal clear, no one can say, oh, you didn't say it. Oh, I was thinking this way. You can't think in any way. There is only one way of thinking in some specific scenario.
Let's touch on clarity one more time. There's a famous marketer, which you might see him on social media a lot. I only came across him probably over the last year. His name is Rory Sutherland, right? He is a British guy who worked, I don't know if he still works for them, but he was like the executive chairman for one of the biggest marketing agencies in the world. I think it was called Ogilvy, right? He wrote a book called Alchemy, which is pretty fantastic. You should definitely read it. But one of the things that he says is that clarity trumps persuasion 100% of the time. Clarity trumps persuasion 100% of the time. But here's the other thing that he also says. Perception beats cognition 100% of the time. So perception, when you're, I think to give you an example. So I worked in hospitality for a while. Well, 12 years actually. So like this example stuck with me when I heard him say it. But he was like, okay, here's what the difference between perception and cognition is. Apparently this hotel actually exists in Eastern Europe. It was a company that bought a prison. And you go in there and the room is, I think, painted one color. It's got one TV. It's got one channel. It's in black and white. It only plays The Big Lebowski. It's got one coat hanger. The bed is on a rack above the shower. And he said, the person's perception matters the most here. Because if you communicate that they're going to come here and it's going to be like a 5-star or like Marriott level experience, they'll probably go there and think that is the absolute worst hotel experience that they've ever had, right? However, if you change it and you make it relevant and you help them understand like the pre-framing perception of what they're going to get, you say, there's this really cool, different Eastern European hotel that's modeled after this like high security prison thing. You're going to get taken care of and you're getting all this stuff, but like you're going to be able to feel what it was like for the prisoners there in this thing. You might instead think it's the best hotel experience that you've ever had in terms of like different hotel experiences. And that's the difference. Yeah. And I always thought that was really powerful, especially just from the perception of marketing, right? Like you have to make sure that whatever you say to people, that they really understand the outcome that they should expect when they do an interaction or they take an action.
I totally agree, because also a point is that we have to always remember that we never see the reality as it is, but our brain is making an interpretation of this reality. So the better the informations are conveyed to our eyes, to our brain, the better is and different is the interpretation that we can have, and also the feelings that we can have about an experience or something that we buy or whatever. And to do that and to do this, we have to communicate. We have to be able to express ourselves to deliver the message. This is a dynamic process, and this is what makes it difficult, because you talk with different people. So as we said before, we have to talk like different languages.
Also thinking about this same concept from the perspective of leadership. I was talking about from giving somebody a marketing perspective of an experience, right? But when you're talking about from the leadership perspective, making sure that people's perception is accurate, right? If I'm saying, okay, my vision is that we run a painting company. My vision is that our craftsmanship is the most precise, like most beautiful thing. Like you're not going to see any spots on the floor, like no paint drips. You're not going to see any overlapping paint across like framing or the wall. We're going to be using the best possible paint, etc. And then I bring somebody on who's a painter, right? And I just say, paint this as best as you can, right? And I haven't pre-framed anything. I haven't shown them what the quality of the product is. I haven't shown them examples of what master craftsmanship looks like in terms of painting things. I haven't given them the tools to like the tape or like the mats that you can put on the floor that protect the floor, or even like on the walls or whatever. I haven't given them any of that stuff. What do you think are the chances that I'm going to get the outcome that I'm expecting as the leader of that company? Probably not a high chance that they're going to do things at the exquisite level that I'm expecting.
Yeah.
And then you get into the scenario where they don't deliver, and a lot of people fail here. They're like, they come to the employee and they're like, you should know better. And they explode. But what a lot of people don't realize is that when they explode on people like that, it's almost like they're taking out their own self-loathing on the employee, right? Because they haven't done the work.
They're thinking the employees are in their own head, but they're not. They're in their own head. Once again, this is about being specific. You are not giving clear instructions. Basically, you are leaving things by chance, hoping that someone will understand why, I would say. Your instructions weren't clear enough. And usually when we try to do something at our best, we don't have something that is pushing us, like some constraints. We never do our best, because also, once again, our brain is built to save energy. So once we get tired, we slack off a little bit. We start thinking like, oh, okay, but I think it's good enough. Good enough is not the best. It's just enough. But if you know that you have to match a certain standards, you can compare what you're doing with the standards, and you can say, okay, there is a mismatch. I have to cover it up. But if there is not the standards, you can compare. Whatever you do is acceptable, at least for you. Yeah, we're always going again on the two main points, which are clarity and communications. When you squeeze concepts, it's kind of funny that everything is so simple and complicated at the same time, because the main points are always the same. But when you try to put them into practice, you can discover some magic words and say how difficult it is. But if you have in mind that the main goal being clear, communicate in a good way, give standards, then everything becomes more manageable.
You also lead from the front. Think about that. If you are the best leader and you are a master communicator, like super specific, putting the work to document things, putting in the time to make sure and prove that the people that are under you understand on a really deep, precise level what it is that you're trying to do, what your quality standards are, why they should show up, who they should show up for. Again, thinking about the customer in every interaction. And you do that every single day. Think about how that rubs off on everybody around you. You force them to elevate their standards, right? And they also can't go backwards. When you're building a habit, right? Once the habit is there, it's very hard to undo a habit.
Yeah.
And like one of the other things Rory Sutherland talks about is like, because he studies behavioral sciences, the main thing that drives behavior is habit, social norms, and social proof. Yeah. Right? Habit, social norms, and social proof. Right? So what are the social norms, the things that we normally do, standards, right? That drive actions that are repeatable, right? Your habits, and the social proof that you put out there, like From a leadership perspective, like a really good thing around social proof that people should consider is it works in two different directions, right? And it amplifies behavior, right? I didn't know this for the longest time, but I ran a study, right? There's another podcast I listen to. It's called Nudge. It's a behavioral science podcast. I highly recommend it. I think it's run by HubSpot. And one of the episodes, he interviews somebody around the impact of positive and negative social proof. And I think the example was a forest of petrified wood somewhere in the United States. And they had a sign that was like, I think at the beginning, the first sign was like, please stop taking our petrified wood. People were stealing the petrified wood, right? And they're like, stop taking our petrified wood. 20 tons of petrified wood were stolen over the last 12 months, right? What they found was because they highlighted the negative behavior that they didn't want, it actually increased that negative behavior because people realized that other people were getting away with it. And this, like the behavioral scientist that was working with them, they helped rewrite it. And it was something like, people who really believe in protecting our petrified wood things, they leave it alone, right? So they were talking about the positive thing. And that dramatically reduced it in the other direction, right? So you think about leadership in the work environment, right? Constantly going out to your team members and praising them and showing everybody in team meetings, like, this is the behavior that we want. You over there, like Byron, like you did a really, really good job. He exemplified the values and the techniques that show master craftsmanship. Like he's showing up for our customer. You do that over and over again. It teaches everybody around them that's what is valued. That's the standard. And it also makes it feel good because if you're communicating the vision regularly and you're saying, like, you're calling people up, like, you're doing this, right? You are an A-team player. They'll start doing it with each other and they'll start looking out for other scenarios where people aren't showing up for that. Especially if you have 18 players. The 18 players, they don't want to see you suffer keeping a B or C team player on the team, right? They'll look at you and they're like, why haven't you gotten rid of this person? Or why haven't you trained them up so that they don't exhibit this behavior anymore? Or why haven't you put systems in place to make sure that that doesn't happen? It's dragging everybody else down, right? And you can lose 18 players like that really quickly, right? But one of the other things that's also really, really powerful, which I'd say is like a step beyond like the social proof, is when you're giving social proof to a person, don't give the praise, when you're giving praise to somebody as positive social proof, like don't give it necessarily just to them, right? Or like in a private setting. Praise that person to another person when they can hear you doing it, right? Because I don't know if you've ever experienced this, but it's so different when you hear people talking about you, right, than somebody talking to you. Like, yes, it's nice if your boss does it, but you almost don't feel it the same way. It hits differently, especially if you're doing it in a group setting. You're doing it for all these different things, and people can see all of these different examples.